I have found no videos on full disassembly of the Kimber CDS9. We will soon understand why. Kimber really does not want you to disassemble your CDS9 further than this point. Before you decide to disassemble your CDS9 beyond a normal field strip, understand doing so voids the warranty found in the user manual. I begin with the CDS9 already field stripped. Disassembly is different than a 1911, as will become apparent shortly. The disassembly is nothing special, but reassembly must be quite precise. On the right side of the frame, rotate the right side slide stop lever clockwise approximately 90 degrees and remove from the frame. Grip removal requires a T9 size torque bit. Each grip assembly consists of the Torx head screw, the grip, and an O-ring buffer located under the grip. Be careful not to misplace. The buffer ensures that the grip does not work loose. Removal of the magazine release requires a 1/16 inch hex wrench. Press in on the mag release a specific amount until the hex wrench can be turned about 45 degrees counterclockwise. The release will then push fully through the hole and be removed. The hex head magazine release lock can then be carefully moved back counterclockwise, releasing the lock and spring from the magazine release. To remove the trigger assembly, first push out the trigger pivot pin. With the trigger pivot pin removed, the assembly can be removed from the frame. There is a trick to this. Do not get in a hurry and do not force things. Place thumb safety in the off position and the hammer down. You will remove the left thumb safety first. Hold a finger over the left side of the thumb safety to catch the safety plunger assembly that is freed when the thumb safety is turned clockwise past the normal on position. With the hammer down, punch out the mainspring security pin. Push out the mainspring housing. There is now no tension on the hammer. I use a jig I made some time ago for a project that I have long forgotten. It consists of a pin that is locked into a piece of angle iron and that will fit into one side of the vise jaws. With a padded jaw on the opposite side, I compress this jig pin into the mainspring assembly, enough to push out the pin and disassemble. Push out the hammer pin from right to left and pull out the hammer through the top of the control block and frame. Now we get to the point where the CDS9 departs dramatically from a standard 1911. The control block is the most visible internal design departure. Instead of the hammer, sear, disconnector, and safety pin lever being assembled directly into the frame, they are instead assembled into or onto the control block, which in turn is placed into the frame. Everything is free to fall out of the block when the control block is removed from the frame. Everything except the hammer must be reinstalled correctly into or onto the control block before placing the block back into the frame for reassembly. The second divergence from standard 1911 design is the Sear spring. It is critical that you understand how the Sear spring is installed. Note how the Sear spring is not fully visible from the CDS9 frame. The mainspring is installed before the control block. The control block is then maneuvered into place in such a manner to correctly receive tension from the mainspring. Observe how the Sear spring is in place from the bottom of the installed black control blocks. Pay particular attention to exactly how the Sear legs, lower firing pin safety lever, and disconnector all sit in relation to the top of the Sear spring. When reinstalled later, this positioning is critical. Two pins secure the control box to the frame, the hammer pin and the Sear pin. Since the hammer pin was removed earlier, along with the hammer, the only thing holding the control box in place is the Sear pin. With a punch, push out the Sear pin. The control box can be lifted up and forward out of the frame. The parts will likely fall out during this process. The Sear spring is not uninstalled or reinstalled as you normally would in 1911. Uninstall of the Sear spring is done now. There are 4 steps to disassembling the slide. First, remove the firing pin by using a punch to press in on the firing pin while at the same time pushing in on the firing pin safety block. Slide the face of the firing pin stop down. Protect the firing pin and spring from flying off and remove. Second, unscrew the optic plate. Take care not to lose the firing pin safety spring as the plate is removed. Third, remove the firing pin safety spring and firing pin safety. Fourth, using a roll pin punch, drive out the extractor retaining pivot roll pin. Remove the extractor, extractor spring, and extractor rubber buffer. Insert the extractor rubber buffer into the extractor spring. Insert and align the extractor with the roll pin hole. Drive in the roll pin using the correct size roll pin punch. Install the firing pin safety and then the firing pin safety spring into the slide. Install the optic plate. Be sure that the firing pin safety spring is aligned and not pinched. Install the firing pin and spring assembly into the slide by depressing the firing pin safety. Install the firing pin stop while both pushing in on the firing pin safety and the firing pin. Install the Sear spring. Hold in place with the empty mainspring housing. This keeps the Sear spring from coming loose during install of the control block. Assembly and installing the control block is the most important piece to ensure the pistol is fully functional after assembly. Study these images and your own pistol before disassembly. Here are several views of the control block and parts. This image shows the function of the firing pin safety system. The upper and lower firing pin safety levers go outside of the box on the right side. Here we see the highlighted disconnector, which installs in the control box. Left shows everything including the hammer installed into the control block, but attached via slave pins to the exterior of the frame. Center shows the Sear spring sitting approximately where it meets the legs of the Sear and the firing pin safety lower lever when installed. The right image shows the hammer installed into the control box from the same angle. Either by design or happenstance, the mainspring housing assembly retainer pin is the same diameter as the Sear spring. It also is just the length needed to hold the Sear and disconnector into the control block while still allowing the block to be inserted into the frame. Install the Sear and disconnector into the control block, then slide the pin in place. I apply a small amount of thicker gun grease onto this pin during the install. This helps hold the pin during the process. Lay the control block with the right side up. Use another drop of grease in the pivot holes for the upper and lower firing pin safety levers to also hold in place. The control block is installed without the hammer, but using the hammer pin or a slave pin before the Sear pin is installed. Keep the block at about a 45-degree angle until it aligns with the hammer pin hole, but is not contacting the already installed Sear spring. Once the hammer pin is installed, apply pressure to the control box and swing the box into line with the Sear pin hole. Push in the Sear pin carefully as it is at the same time pushing out the mainspring housing pin that had been holding the control box together. Test that the Sear spring is applying pressure to the Sear and safety pin lever. Before installing the hammer assembly, partially remove the hammer spring housing enough to not interfere with the hammer install but still provide tension on the Sear spring to maintain positioning. Install the hammer strut into the frame from the top until you see the strut in front of the Sear spring. Pull out the hammer pin or slave pin until you can just fit the hammer into the control box. Reinsert the slave pin. Now install the hammer pin by slowly pushing out the slave pin until seated. Carefully remove the empty mainspring housing from the frame. While being careful not to dislodge the Sear spring, reassemble the mainspring housing in reverse order used to disassemble. Install the mainspring housing into the frame and ensuring that the Sear spring is in its slot. To reinstall the trigger assembly, first place the assembly into the frame the same way it was removed. Align the trigger assembly. It will not fully fit. Use something to force the front lower tip of the trigger back just enough to allow the trigger into the trigger slot. Use a punch smaller than the trigger pin hole because the spring on this side covers the hole a slight amount. Align the trigger so that the punch can be inserted. Take trigger pin and insert from the right side of the frame, pushing out the punch as you go. Make sure the head of the pin is fully seated. Test the function of the action. Cock hammer, hold hammer and pull the trigger. Should fall. Slowly cock the hammer. Should hear and see the hammer cock into the half cock notch and then the full cock notch. Ensure that the hammer is in the down position. Place the left side thumb safety fully into the safety pin hole. Positions just shy of straight up and down. Turn the frame over and install the right side safety. May require a slight non-marring force to seat. Insert the safety plunger and spring. Test. Assemble magazine release lock. Place magazine release into frame. Hold release depressed as if wanting to remove the magazine. Turn about 90 degrees clockwise. Place O-ring buffer into recess in frame. With a Torx number 9 wrench, tighten screw and grip to frame. Same with the other side. On the right side of the frame, place into the frame about 90 degrees from normal. Rotate the lever counterclockwise. It is now ready for the left side slide stop to be reinserted. Ensure hammer does not drop when the safety is on. Ensure the hammer does fall when the safety is off and the trigger is pulled. Ensure you hear the hammer click into the half-cock notch and also into the full cock position. Ensure the hammer will not fall when out of battery. Ensure that the slide is held back when opened with an empty magazine.